Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce, and today we're doing another Women of Horror Spotlight. Today I have with us, she's an author. She has her debut novel coming out July 28th, and it's called Gladys the Vampire. I have with us Heather Hine. Heather, welcome to the Horror Room.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. All right, so tell us a little bit about Gladys the Vampire.
Uh, Gladys the Vampire is something that I started off doing as a serialized fiction story on Kindle, and I didn't know how to get started with her. I knew that I wanted to have like a bunch of senior citizen vampires because they're not sexy and they're not hot and they're not sparkly. And for some reason, horror comedy strikes a big note with me. So I finished the serial and then I thought, you know what? I think they all have a little bit more to say. So I got in touch with someone who does publicity and helps new authors get their stuff out there. And she was excited. So we got together on the project and she's ready to go.
And you even gave her a senior citizen named Gladys. I mean, you don't hear that many people, I'd say under 50 with the name Gladys.
Right. And originally I had a lame name for the book. It was called The Night People. And I was visiting with my sister and she's like, oh, you just got to call it Gladys the Vampire. I was like, okay, so that's great. I like it.
Straight to the point. Straight to the point. Now, so this is your debut novel. Mm-hmm. How exciting is it to get it published? And, in a couple of weeks, it's going to be out.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So it's funny. I was looking through some of my Facebook memories, and 5 years ago, I had an employer ask me where I saw myself in 5 years. And I said, well, I see myself being published and no longer working here, basically. So it's nice to see that sometimes putting that forward and manifesting can actually work. So I'm super excited. It is not necessarily the novel I thought I would be publishing right now, but I'm really excited that it's her.
Amazing. Now, as being a new author, this is your first book, and I have a lot of individuals who are new authors, or they're about to write their first book, or they're thinking about writing their first book. What were some struggles and I would say roadblocks that you ran into?
One of them is trying to balance everything else in your life, especially if writing is not like your all the time job. My youngest just graduated from high school, so I had children in the house and other responsibilities, and it was trying to put all of that together. I have been querying agents for a couple of my other projects for a long time now, and that can get really discouraging, but I understand that nobody ever gets like picked right away. Pick me. So I'm fine with that, really. It's just, it's amazing how much time it takes, even if it's an indie publishing and something that you're doing small press.
Now, was it hard to, because there's so many small press out there, there's so many small publications. Was it hard for you to select the right small press?
Well, she actually selected me.
Oh, perfect.
We've been working together just as like writing colleagues for a long time. And she knew that I was working on this project. And she said, I think I can help you get this done. And I'm really glad because she does all the things I don't know how to and don't want to know how to do. Like she put my website together and she does all the technical things. And I am not a technical person. That's why I write. So,
yes. So getting back to your book. When it comes to Gladys and the senior citizen vampires, what are some struggles that they run into? Are they losing their teeth?
That's funny that you mentioned the teeth because Gladys actually has dentures. And on Facebook, I put out a little like mini contest and I said, how do vampire dentures work? The best answer gets to be written into the book. So I have this vampire dentist. Her name's Dr. Trish. She has a long history. And basically when Gladys's fangs come out, her dentures pop out and she breaks them and ultimately has to get them repaired again and again and again. So that's one of her big challenges. The other big challenge that they all faced before this new kid came on the scene was they just wanted to live a life of anonymity. They didn't want to be noticed. They didn't want to make waves. So they just kept this quiet little group of them together with a sort of an AA style support group. And then Ethan comes along, and he's a 19-year-old idiot with a lot of crazy ideas about vampires from watching too many movies.
So one of the things I know about vampires, which is why I would love to be a vampire, you do not age.
Uh,
Now, now in this story, did they turn into vampires when they were senior citizens, or do your vampires age?
no, they don't age. They get kind of stuck right where they're at. So Gladys has thinning hair. She has bad knees. They're not going to get any better, but they're not going to get any worse. So she's just kind of stuck there in arrested undevelopment for a long time.
But that's horrible. I mean, can you imagine right now to be if you could be a vampire? Wouldn't you want to be stuck like right now, or in your 30s or 20s, or as a teenager, like as a senior citizen? I mean, that must be tough.
I would think so. Like I'm disclosure, I'm 50. I wouldn't mind being turned now because I don't have to carry all the weight of caring about what everybody thinks about me. And I'm kind of like at that point in my life where I don't have to like listen to a lot of stuff. So that wouldn't be so bad, but definitely not at 65. That would not be my preference.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in my 40s, and like I'm like, whew, I know, I saw my parents when they were getting in their older, and like I was like, boy, to be stuck in that. I mean, you're tired all the time,
Mm-hmm.
But I'm assuming as a vampire, you don't have as many medical issues.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely can't get new ones. And I
Yeah, you
guess if you
can't.
had diabetes, that would be sort of a moot point since you're not actually ingesting food anymore.
Hmm.
Every once in a while, they break down and try, and it has disastrous results. We all know vampires can't eat regular people food, so that's. But sometimes that temptation is out there, you know?
Yeah, it really is. Now, okay, so when you were constructing this book, uh, did you really have to like think about like, oh my goodness, what do senior citizens do? And if a senior citizen was a vampire, what are some challenges they would run into?
Yeah, I guess not all of them are technically senior citizens, but they're all much older, and they're none of them are, like I said, hot and sexy and sparkly.
Hmm.
So a lot of them had to give up the jobs that they loved. Gladys was like 6 months from retirement, so she didn't actually get to retire, and now she works the night shift at a nursing home as a nurse, which is kind of a drag. One of my other characters, Hans, is stuck working in a grocery store stocking the shelves at night. And my other lovely lady, Karen, had to quit her job at the DMV for obvious reasons. So she's kind of been living off of her savings for a long time.
So these are not lavish lives you see in most vampire movies. Most vampires are millionaires, and and they have big fancy mansions and drive expensive cars at night. And these are like regular people.
Yeah, I imagine like this is sort of what I was thinking. Like those are the famous vampires, but just like regular people, I'm guessing they are vampires who aren't famous and are just trying to like figure things out. Can we swear in this podcast?
You sure can,
They're
100%.
just trying to figure their shit out, It's
Yeah.
frustrating for all of them. And then Ethan like has these ideas like, oh, let's go chase down this head vampire that turned us all. And they're like, have you looked at us lately? Like, what are you thinking? We aren't been, we're not made for this. Eventually he does push them into a point where they have to make a choice though. So Ethan.
But that's an awful fucking vampire that would turn older people into vampires. Like, or maybe he's helping them out. I don't know. But like, I mean,
Actually, so they don't all know this when they first meet each other, but their head vampire turned them all because they all provided poor customer service in one way or another.
oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. So I mean, so is it? I mean, so there's horror writers, there's comedy writers. This is a horror comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Was it hard to mix the two aspects together?
Well, I never sought out to become to do this. Like I have a lot of dark horror that I've written, and my sister and I grew up listening to comedy records when we were kids, and we both have this really terribly off kilter sense of humor. So to me, everything is funny or you'll start crying. So I know that not everybody appreciates like that bit of humor that I have, but like if you don't take things with a little bit of levity, you're going to be miserable forever. So you just gotta. And really, I did a whole like panel at StokerCon about how comedy and horror are very, very closely connected to each other, and you can't keep your reader on a constant like sense of fright all the time. You have to let them breathe, and that's what makes a really good story. And then I read A Dirty Job and You Suck, and I'm trying to think of the author's name, which for some reason is not hitting me right now, but that's horror comedy. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is absolutely hilarious. So I really wanted to go down that with the stuff that I had on Kindle Vella. So I've got another serial about the devil who's in danger of losing his job because of low recruitment. So he has to like make a deal, and yeah. And shenanigans ensue. So yeah.
Now, people who grew up with you, would they say like, well, that makes sense that this is something Heather would do?
I think so. I'm not sure. I look nice, and so people are often kind of startled by the fact that I have a lot of dark tales to tell. But I think the people who knew me well, they would not be surprised that this is kind of the way that things went for me.
Love it. Now, when it comes to you as an author writing, do you have any habits? Like, do you like to start with the ending and work your way forward? Do you like to work your way forward and come to that ending? Is there a specific time you like to write? Is there a specific music? Do you have to have a glass of wine or a cigarette? What are some of your writing habits?
I wish I could have a cigarette. That would be awesome. But, I do want to live for a while yet.
Yeah.
So I'm a super, super planner. So that means that I make very detailed outlines. And every November, there's something called National Novel Writing Month. So that's when you're challenged to write an entire novel in a month. So for the purposes of that challenge, it's 50,000 words. But as a horror writer, your writing has to be between 85 to 95,000 words, which is close to 300 pages. So I spend all of October every year, like super planning. I do all my research. I stick it into this mega outline. Like I think the last outline I did was 20,000 words. And then I just dump everything in November. So even though I plan really meticulously, I am always happy to let the characters do what they want, go where they want. Like, it's fine. For serial writing, it was completely the opposite. I was like, well, I think I kind of know where I want to go with this, but you just have to crank out 2 or 3 episodes a week. So there was no time for all of that. I would plan like 3 or 4 episodes in advance and kind of have an idea of where I was going. And then, nope, they all decided to do something different. So scrap that. Let's go. And then when I turned the serial into a novel, I had to do it in reverse. So instead of like shaving away all of the unnecessary bits, I had to add to it because those episodes have to be really quick, really snappy, and you can't add in a whole bunch of backstory and exposition and all of that. So it was kind of a treat to be able to take that tiny pile and like really expand it. So that was a very different way than I'm used to cranking out a novel. And then, of course, there's this is editing and so much editing.
Yeah.
I usually like to sit with a glass of wine when I write or beer. And I am part of a group called Shut Up and Write, which is where you get together with a bunch of people and then you sit down and literally shut up for an hour and you write and then you drink again. So
nice.
I've been a part of that since before the pandemic, and that and the other writers groups that I have belonged to have been like a lifesaver for me. And now, I mean, other than going out to the pub to meet with them, I prefer to just stay home and write all the time. I don't need to go out. I don't want to be out there with people. People are the scariest things in this world, not the monsters.
Yes, they are, more than any horror story there is. Now, is it hard as a writer? Because I can imagine if I was a writer, I would do this. Is it hard not to put a little bit of yourself in each one of your characters?
Oh, I think there's no way to get around doing that. I mean, I think that no matter how hard you try, your personality is going to fit into those people. I also take my characters from people that I've met and people that I know, and it's usually an aggregate. It's not usually like, this is this person, except for a couple of circumstances. So there's a character in GLADYS who I have patterned after my horrible neighbor behind me. I changed her name. I hope you're watching, Arliss. And
That's fucked up.
and then Ethan is based on this kid who worked with my husband way back, I'd say like 25 years ago. He was like this lanky idiot. And I was like, well, that would make a great character to be turned into a vampire and be totally clueless. So part of me is in all of my characters, but I definitely pull in aspects of other people for my characters. And there have been a couple of novels that I've written where each of the characters is kind of a different part of my own personality. So,
Huh? Now, has anyone ever read one of your stories and been like, "Hey, Heather, that seems like me"?
well, my college roommate is in one of my books, but his name is his name in the story. I asked him for permission first, and then I let him read the rough draft, and I said, "Is this okay? Is this you?" And he was like, "Yeah, that's totally fine." I've had people read some of my stuff and say, "Is this you?" And I'm like, "Well, not 100%, no, but sort of, yeah." So
Now, one question, right now, people are such fucking douchebags. Like when it comes to reviews and comments,
mhm.
do you pay attention to reviews? Do you read reviews at all?
I have read the reviews that people have written about other people's work enough to not want to read any of my own reviews. Nobody's ever said really bad things to me about my writing, and nobody's ever posted anything horrible about my writing. But I don't plan to go on Goodreads because that place is a cesspool of negativity.
It really is, isn't it?
I'm really shocked at how awful people are. And if I've read something that I didn't care for, I just either put it down and move on with my life, or I finish it and be like, well, that was kind of a waste of my time. But I'm not in the habit of posting anything negative for any purpose unless it's something seriously terrible. And it's more like, I went to this place and they served me, gluten, and I can't eat that. And, those kinds of things. But about people's creativity, no, I would never do that just because it's so subjective.
It is.
There are Stephen King stories, who's my favorite writer, sorry, but there are some of his stories that I wouldn't give 5 stars to just because it wasn't my favorite book. So,
because I do reviews on my channel of indie horror movies, but I always say this is my opinion, this is on my taste. Sure. So that means, because there are some movies that I have given 5 stars to, and people comment like, "Wow, Travis, this is the shittiest movie I've ever seen in my life. How the hell do you get 5 stars to this movie?" And I'm like, because this is my opinion, mm-hmm. This is my opinion, and I'm picking up pros and cons about what I like as a movie watcher. So it's not necessarily, I don't know, but I agree with what you said. But what you said about Goodreads, if you go on Goodreads and even as a book reader and looked at reviews, you would never read a fucking book.
Yeah,
because it's so toxic.
And that's the thing. If I'm going to go see a movie or if I'm going to read a book, I don't want to know anything. Like maybe a little bit about the plot, but I like to be surprised. I don't want to know where the story is going to go. I don't want to know what other people thought of it because I don't want that to color my experience of my reading or my watching. I'd rather just make up my own mind. So I really don't even read those for the things that I'm going to go see or read myself.
I'm the same. I'm the same way. Now I have read a book and then went on to see what other people's reviews were, to see if what my opinion was similar on par than everyone else. And it's always a mixed bag. It's always a mixed bag. But like when I see a majority of the negative reviews, it's not even like constructive criticism. It's like this book sucks, and it's something ridiculous like that. Like, now, why does this book suck? Like, come on now. Like, what do you not like about it? It's just pointless.
And I found a lot that some of the movies that I like are often ones that didn't get, grand reviews in IMDb or with Rotten Tomatoes. So, for example, my favorite Alien movie is Prometheus. which
Really?
hasn't gotten, which has not gotten great reviews among the Alien franchise fans.
Hmm.
But and it's because it's not as bloody and gory as all the rest of them. But
Correct.
I like it because there's this deep psychological plot, and it also has these amazing, like, questions about the universe. Like, what does it mean to create? What responsibility do you have when you've created something? Like, it's just this great, it's so much deeper than just a horror movie. And a lot of times that's what I look for when I'm reading something or when I'm watching a movie, is like, well, what's deeper in here? Like, it's a horror movie, yeah, but is there something deeper in there? Because I'm not a big, huge 80s slasher film movie fan. I mean, I was in the 80s, but God, I watched all of them. But I have refined my tastes over time. I don't drink PBR anymore. I drink, fancy
Yes.
beer. So
Yeah, and it changed over time. Like one of the controversial movies that I say that I love out of a series is when it comes to the Friday the 13th movie. I'm not a huge fan of the series, but I respect Jason. He's a great iconic villain. But I love the reboot. Like, I find the reboot, I think it's the best one, and people look at me like I'm crazy when I say that. But it just had it dealt deeper into the story of Jason, and also it answered a lot of questions that the other movies never did. Like, how the hell does Jason get from one place to another place so quickly?
mhm.
And he had an underground tunnel system where he could just run through it. It just answered a lot of questions that, like, the other movies didn't.
Yeah. I think that's true. And although I will say that I get a little bit frustrated when they keep not rebooting and making a new, like, the next volume in something, but when they just keep remaking the same movie over and over, because
Hmm.
there are so many amazing indie horror writers out there, and there's so much
Tons.
material that we don't have to keep spinning out like I think there's like 5 different Carrie movies. And let's just face it, Sissy Spacek
Yeah.
you can't beat that. But also, like, why are we doing that? So I was at StokerCon in San Diego in May, and I got to sit down and have breakfast with Paul Tremblay, which was awesome.
Nice. Nice.
And we were talking about Knock at the Cabin, which is based off his book, The Cabin at the End of the World, which I said, did you have anything to do with that title? And he said, no. But it's funny how people think that authors have so much to do with the movies that their books are turned into, and we don't. And even as an author, once you have given that over to your publisher or whoever, your editor or whoever is doing it, you kind of have to be willing to let go of that and be like, okay, well, I've given it to you, go do something with it now. So you have to be willing to let go of a lot of control. And I am a super control freak in every other aspect of my life, that it's kind of nice to just be like, here you go.
Have fun with this.
Yeah.
With this. Now, all right, Heather, this is Horror Channel, so I'm going to ask you 3 random horror questions.
Okay.
It's a personal opinion.
Okay.
All right. What horror character would you say, could be a villain, it could be a final girl, it could be anything, would you say that over the years you was like, I relate to that character the most? It could be in a book or a movie.
The horror character and not a character.
It could be a character in a horror film.
Oh, okay.
Or a horror book.
I can tell you, Edgar Fremantle in Stephen King's Doom McKee. The first time I read that book, it didn't really hit that much with me. And then somebody told me it was their favorite Stephen King. And I was like, really? So I went back and read it again. And then I was like, oh God, I should have read this better the first time. And the character, Edgar, was in a construction accident. He lost his arm. He had a head injury, shattered his hip. His marriage fell apart, and he moves to Florida. God help us all. And sorry, Florida. But he starts painting with what he calls phantom arm telepathy. And at first, it's great. And he's like, wow, like all of these great things are happening. And then he realizes that he has the power to do things with his paintings. So he actually ends up silencing, he paints a serial killer no, there was a killer, and he painted a picture of him kidnapping the little girl, and he did not paint his nose and mouth, and he died in jail. And then things continue to happen, and like he goes into everything with the best of intentions, and I can really identify with like his physical recovery struggles. I've had a lot of surgeries in the last several years, particularly on my lower extremities, so I understand like the frustration of not being able to do the things that you could do. And then when he realizes things have gone too far, he tries to pull it back in and is not able to do all of the pulling back in that he could do. And that's kind of true of like we've all done something like that, where we went into things with the best of intentions and things got out of our control, and you're like, oh crap, now what? So I love Edgar. I really feel for him a lot. So I'd say he's one of my favorite characters in all of the horror books that I've read. Also, Billy Summers, he was a for-hire killer, and he ends up becoming a really great person. So there's like a really nice turnaround for him.
Redemption story.
Yeah.
I love those. What's one horror book? And second question, what's one horror novel that everybody says, rants and rave that this is the greatest thing ever, but you're like, nah, it's okay about, or I don't see it.
Okay, going back to Stephen King again. I read it when I was in high school, and it's great. It's a great book. Don't get me wrong. But now, like most of the newer Stephen King fans only really know that, and there's like Pennywise this and Pennywise that, and I'm like, there's so much more going on in that canon of writing. Like, it's a great book, but I like the parts of that book that don't really have anything to do with the monster himself. Like, I love the kids' relationships with each other, and I love like the time that it was written in, and it's so rich with imagery from the 1950s and the 80s, and just, there's just so much more to that story than just the monster. So yeah,
it has definitely became over time, like, yes, the Stephen King's biggest book or most popular book, and I agree. Stephen King has a lot better stories out there.
Yeah,
and it's even adaptations of movies to me as well.
Yeah, Shawshank was like
Shawshank's amazing.
One of the
Cemetery.
Best, yeah, Shawshank was one of the best book to movie things that was done, and it's not even really horror
none at all
in the typical sense. But there's a lot of
horrific things. Yeah, horrific things happen. All right, final question. Why do you think women in horror movies are either typed as super tough or super weak?
And always without their shirts on?
Yes.
I think it's because, well, for a long time, there weren't a lot of women in horror, period, even though Shirley Jackson is like the queen of the short story in horror. I think she's awesome. But for the longest time, there weren't a lot of women writing horror. And don't take offense, but a lot of the people who were writing horror were men. And so I don't think that they had an opportunity to really explore the fact that women are both things at once and many things in between, good and weak or strong. And, there's so much in between. And I don't know why it's a surprise to people that women can be sensitive and strong. We have babies, so.
Yeah. I never understood it. Like, okay, you can, if a woman's in a horror movie or a horror, she's either crying in a corner unbearably, or she's like a super badass G.I. Jane, like whipping every 20 zombies' asses. Like, why can't you have something in between? like a real woman.
True. I also think it'd be nice if you could have a woman start out and have like a nice character arc. So Sigourney Weaver's character in Alien, she's always a badass, and I would never ever dream of telling her otherwise. But
yes,
it would have been interesting if they could have started her out as being, not as strong, and showing what caused her to become that strong badass character. So I think that that's what makes richer characters, particularly when they're women. When you can show how they've changed and why they changed. So obviously you got to be a badass to kick Jason's ass. I mean, you have to be. You can't just be like, well, sir, have you ever thought about meditation and essential oils? Because you might find that. But I think if you just throw a character in there and don't give them any depth, that's what frustrates me. So I'm not
because one thing I do like about older horror movies was women out defeated the brute villains with their brains. They outsmarted them, and which is probably more realistic on how a woman would defeat Jason or Michael Myers. They would
think smarter, not harder.
Yeah, and I mean they wouldn't go toe to toe in a punching match with Jason, and like you start seeing that in more and more horror movies, and I'm like, okay, like for instance, the last Halloween movies kind of pissed me off. Like we got to see Michael Myers defeat 20 firefighters back to back to back, but he gets his ass whipped by a 70-year-old Laurie Strode, and I'm like, okay, listen, I get it. Laurie Strode is the ultimate final girl, badass and so forth, but you can't have something so extreme where he just got done whipping 20 men's ass and then he gets his ass beat by a senior citizen woman. Like those are two extremes, Sure. So
yeah, I actually have. I was supposed to send my manuscript off to this agent, which I haven't done yet because I want it to be perfect, which I should just send it because it's never going to be. And I'll never send it if I don't. But my protagonist she's a college student and she's made a lot of really bad decisions regarding drinking and a lot of other things. She's got a shitty childhood and she finds herself in a position where her roommate has turned up dead and the police say, well, she was found with all this fentanyl she's been dealing. And Natalie's like, I don't think that's exactly what's happened here. And no one will listen to her. And she's doing the best she can. And we're rooting for her because we know as the reader that she's really on the right track and she knows what she's talking about. But because of how she presents herself and her past, no one really gives her any credit for actually being able to figure this out. And then just as she has like everything in place, he kidnaps her and she finds herself tied up in a basement, surgically silenced. And she has to figure out how to overcome all of her own like issues and her feeling of like, just, I'm just going to make bad decisions and then this is what's going to happen. She has to figure out how to outwit him and take her moment. And she doesn't physically necessarily overpower him. In fact, there's a part where you're not sure if she will get out or not, but she does it mostly by deciding I can either sit here in this basement and let this man do what he wants to me, or I can outsmart him and outwit him and get out of here on my own. So read the book. But
yes, I'm definitely. All right, Heather.
Yes.
Where can everyone find you?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. I have titles available through Barnes & Noble and Amazon currently. I am located in several anthologies that have been printed. And as I said, GLADYS will be available on all of the popular platforms coming up in just a few days. I also have a website, which is www.heatherheinwriter.kikicastlecontent.com. And you can find everything you wanted to know about me there. And if you want a more direct route, you can find my Linktree, which is Linktree/HeatherHeinWriter.
Awesome. Heather, it's been great to have you on. It's been it's been tough trying to get together, but I'm finally glad I was able to get you on.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been a great conversation.
Listen, anytime. Listen, everybody, listen, July 28th, this is in a couple of weeks. It's coming up soon. Please go and grab your copy of GLADYS the Vampire. And also go over to Heather's Linktree and check out some of her other work and follow her on social media. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for coming to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce, and that is Heather Hine. We'll see you next time. Take care.